Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
I genuinely wasn't planning to do another video on Attack on Titan, but then the views went crazy, at least by my channel standards, and the comments section provoked some interesting discussions. So I figured, what the hell, I might as well go ahead and do one more video where I catalog all the problems I had with the ending. Especially since there's still an annoying number of people who are in denial about the ending. Look, when it comes to the ending, there are three groups of people. Those who think the ending is bad, those who think the ending is good but flawed, and those who are objectively wrong. If you like the ending, that's fine, but don't try to pretend it doesn't have problems, because it absolutely does. That would be like trying to argue that X-Men 3 isn't a bad movie. I actually like X-Men 3, I think it's got some good stuff, but I'm not going to say it's a good movie, because objectively it is a mess. Also, if you're wondering why you're seeing footage from Hollow Knight and not Attack on Titan, that's because getting the last video through the copyright censors was a huge pain in the ass. So this time I'm just not going to use clips from Attack on Titan to avoid that whole mess. So, here are 10 problems with Attack on Titan's ending. These aren't in order of severity, they're just more or less in chronological order. I'm also not covering all of the problems with the ending, just the ones that I found to be the biggest and most offensive. So if a problem you have with the ending isn't on this list, that's why. Anyways, let's get started. Problem 1. The insanely huge Titan army. Despite all the fantastical elements, Attack on Titan has always tried to remain at least somewhat grounded, and for the most part I think it succeeded at that. From the regular Titans to the Titan Shifters to the Wall Titans, the series always managed to make the threats feel real and the cost for victories appropriately high. But all of that goes out the window with the final battle, when the Alliance faces off against an army of hundreds if not thousands of former Titan Shifters. Let's put this into perspective. During the Return to Shiganshina arc, the Scouts had 200 soldiers and faced up against just 4 Titan Shifters. And they were utterly slaughtered, and just barely managed to scrape a win in the end. During the second Battle of Shiganshina, Eren was able to hold his ground against 3 enemy Titan Shifters, but he likely would have lost if Zeke hadn't arrived when he did. So it's reasonable to assume that if Eren had been up against 5 or more Titan Shifters, he would have lost for sure. So, in the final battle, the Alliance has 5 Titan Shifters, 1 Ackerman in their prime, 1 injured Ackerman, and 3 normal humans. I'm sorry, but even against just 100 Titan Shifters, the Alliance wouldn't stand a chance. Against hundreds of Titan Shifters, the only logical outcome would be for them to lose immediately and badly. The fact that they don't completely destroys the narrative tension. It becomes painfully obvious that the characters aren't staying alive because of their skill or bravery, but simply because the plot won't let them die. This is probably the absolute worst case of Conservation of Ninjutsu I have ever seen. And if you don't know what that is, I'll put a link in the description to an OSP video where they talk about it. Now, as glaring a problem as this is, I'll admit that it didn't initially bother me when I first read about it in the manga. Because despite the plot holes it opens up, the concept of fighting this massive army of titans is still kind of awesome. Plus, it was really neat to be able to see the various titans of times past. So while this is a major issue with the climax of the story, if the other 9 problems on this list didn't exist, I probably would have given it a pass. But unfortunately, it's just the first in a long line of bad narrative choices. Problem 2. The Dead Shifters helping the Alliance. Earlier in the story, it was established that Ymir was the one who had been creating all of the Titan bodies. Every pure Titan, every Titan Shifter's Titan form, every instance of healing, all of it was her. So ultimately, everything related to the Titans traces back to her. The fact that the Alliance can still use their Titan powers is explained when Eren reveals that he wants to give them the freedom to fight if that is what they want. But while Ymir is deferring to Eren's will, it's still her power, and so it's really her who is allowing the Alliance to fight and use their powers. When that massive Titan army is summoned, by all appearances it is Ymir's doing. While she's allowing the Alliance the option to fight, she's also doing everything in her power to make sure that they fail, and is using every last Titan form she created against them. But then after Armin and Zeke have their little talk, they are able to contact the dead shifters we saw earlier in the story and convince them to take control of their Titan forms and help the Alliance, which they do and help save the day. There are so many problems with this. First of all, as I said before, from the beginning, Ymir was the one who was in control of the Titan powers. She was the one who's creating the Titan bodies. The only reason why she allowed the Titan shifters to transform and use their abilities was because of her slave mentality. It was never really their power, so it doesn't make sense for the deceased shifters to all of a sudden be able to take control of their Titan forms. The only possibilities are that the dead shifter's will is suddenly overriding Ymir's will without warning or explanation, which is bad and lazy writing, or Ymir is suddenly allowing the dead shifters to take control of their Titan forms without warning or explanation, which is bad and lazy writing. Basically, this is bad and lazy writing no matter what. If the Dead Shifter's will is overriding Ymir's will, then why the hell did they wait so long? That one shot of Armin and Bertolt that happened right before Bertolt's Titan first appeared indicates that Bertolt knew his Titan was being used against his friends. So why didn't he do something? Why did he just sit there and let his Titan nearly kill Reiner? He interfered to save Annie, why didn't he do the same for Reiner? What was so special about Zeke and Armin that the Dead Shifters didn't interfere until those two asked them to? And why the hell was it just the handful of Titan Shifters we knew who helped the Alliance? Wouldn't a lot, potentially most, of the Dead Shifters from Titan's past be opposed to the rumbling and the genocide of their descendants, given that there are likely more Eldians outside of Paradis than inside? Why didn't they help too? Alternatively, Ymir could be the one allowing the Dead Shifters to take control of their Titans to help the Alliance. But why would she do this? That insanely huge Titan army indicates that she was doing everything in her power to make sure the Alliance failed, so what changed her mind? Why did she go from siding with Eren to siding with the Alliance? Was it just because of the conversation between Armin and Zeke? If so, why? What was so special about what Armin and Zeke said that she spontaneously changed her mind? And if she wants the Alliance to win now, then why are the Titans even still fighting? Why doesn't she just make all of them stop in place and let the Alliance kill Eren? What is her fucking deal? I'm sorry, but no matter how you slice this, it makes no sense. The Dead Shifters coming to the aid of the Alliance isn't an inherently bad idea, and in theory it could work, but the execution of this idea was just bafflingly terrible. For me, this was where the story jumped the shark. Before this, the final arc had had a few issues with the writing and pacing, and the huge Titan army was a pretty big problem. But I was still invested and immersed, and I still had faith that the ending would be good. But this moment, when all the Dead Shifters saved the day out of nowhere, was bad enough to shatter my suspension of disbelief and make me question what the hell I was reading. I still held out hope that maybe this was just a little stumble near the end and that the final 2 chapters could still salvage things, but unfortunately it was all downhill from here. Problem 3. Zeke's death. Hoo boy, this one's a doozy. The first problem is that Zeke's character was wasted in the final arc. After it had been established that Ymir had been the one building the Titan bodies this whole time, I thought that Zeke would be forced to be the one building the Titan bodies after Eren freed Ymir, both because Ymir didn't want to do it anymore, and because she wanted to punish Zeke for being the last in a long line of royal assholes telling her what to do. That could have been interesting, especially since it would mean that Zeke had been helping the Alliance the whole time every time they transformed. I thought that maybe this is what would give the Alliance an opening to win. Zeke secretly assisting the Alliance would also help explain why Falco was able to fly and find them again relatively quickly. But instead, I guess Zeke was just doing nothing? I don't know, it just seems like kind of a waste. The second problem is Levi killing Zeke. Now, the story had been heavily implying that Levi was going to have to follow in Erwin's footsteps. Just as Erwin had to give up on his dream and die for the greater good, it looked like Levi was going to have to do the same and give up his goal of killing Zeke in order to help the Alliance win. But then the story abruptly changes its mind and just hands Levi what he wants on a silver platter. It's just a bit strange and rather jarring. On top of that, I don't really see why Levi being the one to kill Zeke was necessary. I mean, Zeke's plan has failed, the world is being destroyed, and it's entirely his fault for trusting and underestimating Eren. He's suffering a fate worse than death, so if anything, Levi killing him is doing him a favor. Third problem, it makes no sense that Zeke's death would cause the rumbling to stop. Earlier in the story, it appeared that Ymir had developed a slave mentality in life and remained subservient to the royal family even in death. By all appearances, this wasn't because of some magically binding contract or anything, but simply because of her slave mentality, and this is why she deferred to Zeke when he arrived in the past. But when Eren broke her slave mentality and gave her the freedom to choose, she seemingly realized that she didn't actually need to obey the royal family. She could choose something else. At that moment, Zeke became entirely superfluous and his influence over the founder vanished, so his death should not have stopped the rumbling. But even if I'm wrong, and Zeke was somehow necessary to keep the rumbling going, it still makes no sense. When Eren touched Dina's Titan and activated the power of the Founding Titan for the first time, he only briefly made contact, and yet the power remained activated in him for several more hours afterwards, which is how the scouts were able to escape and make it back to the walls without incurring any more casualties. So even if Zeke dying meant that Eren would lose access to the Founding Titan's power, Based on what had been previously established, he still should have been in control of the Founding Titan for several more hours. So the rumbling stopping immediately after Zeke was killed makes no sense. This is one of the main problems with the ending, and we'll be seeing it crop up in a lot of these. It took many of the things that had previously been set up in the narrative and then just ignored them or outright contradicted them, with little to no justification or explanation given for any of it. Problem 4. Turning the Eldians at the fort into Titans. Now, I had assumed that the Eldritch Titan Worm thing was just a plot device to explain the Titan powers, and that it wasn't really a separate and distinct entity from Eren or Ymir. I thought it resided in Eren's spine, and that it latching onto Eren's head was what was keeping him alive. But apparently it was residing in Eren's Titan form, and severing his Titan head somehow separated it from Eren, and now it and Eren need to reunite in order to activate the rumbling again? I don't understand. The paths made invisible connections across time and space, and the Founding Titan is the coordinate connecting it all together. So surely either all of the Founding Titan's powers should be working, or none of them. Making it so that Eren and the worm thing can be separated, and that separating them caused some but not all of the Titan powers to stop working was just bizarre and weird. Based on how things played out, it seems that the main reason why the Titan worm was separated was so that there could be a clear reason for why all of the Eldians at the fort were turned into Titans. But why was that done? The story had already done the whole turning people into Titans thing at the second battle of Shiganshina after Zeke screamed, and there it was properly established and built up. Here it just comes right the hell out of nowhere. Its only purpose seems to be to make the climax last a little longer, which is just silly. If you wanted the climax to last longer, you could have just, not had the rumbling stop, and have the Wall Titans almost reach the fort before the Alliance kills Eren. Now, as random and out of nowhere as this choice was, I would have had a modicum of respect for it if it had had permanent consequences. Namely, all of the people who were turned into Titans died after Eren was killed. But instead, all of them just turned back into human at the end. Not only does that render the whole Titanization thing entirely pointless, it actively opens up a major plot hole. While the Wall Titans are much bigger than the normal Titans, they are the same in the sense that each one was originally an Eldian, and could in theory be turned back into human. So when Eren is killed and the Titan powers were destroyed with him, one of two things should have happened. Either all of the Titans in the world should have turned back into humans, or all of the Titans should have just died, and the humans trapped inside should have died with them. Well, it's safe to assume that the Wall Titans didn't turn back into humans, because the story makes precisely zero mention of it. And I think hundreds of thousands of people materializing in the exact same spot where the Wall Titans were would have been kind of important to mention. So the Wall Titans just died, and therefore logically all the normal Titans should have just died too. But instead, they didn't. Rather than remaining consistent, the story just arbitrarily goes with what would be more convenient, and so kills the Wall Titans but lets the normal Titans go back to being human. I've heard some people try to argue that the Wall Titans are different, that they weren't originally Eldians, and the 145th King just used the power of the Founding Titan to create them from nothing. And I am going to call bullshit on that, because A, it would be inconsistent, and B, if that were true, then Eren wouldn't have needed to break down the walls. He could have just created a bunch of new Colossal Titans from nothing and used them to do the rumbling. The fact that he didn't do that indicates that the Titans can't just come from nothing, and therefore each and every last one was originally an Eldian. In general, Chapter 138 was a giant clusterfuck, and while it was slightly better in the anime, this whole segment of the story still makes no sense. Problem 5. The entire final conversation between Eren and Armin. This conversation is by far the worst part of the worst chapter of Attack on Titan. Not only are the ideas and narrative elements talked about in this conversation completely nonsensical, but the way these ideas are conveyed and the way Eren and Armin talk is just so clunky, awkward, and downright embarrassing. I've seen a lot of fan edits that rewrote the final conversation to be less painful to read, which really makes one wonder how the hell a professional writer who has been doing this for over a decade could have produced this mess. Some people say that the anime fixed this conversation, but it really didn't. All it did was reword things to be slightly less dumb than before. It's marginally better, but it doesn't actually fix any of the real problems, so it's a moot point. You know what, I really don't want to dwell on this one because I still find it physically painful to read or listen to this conversation, so let's just move on. Problem 6, Eren's character assassination, and Problem 7, Ymir's character assassination. I'm tackling these two together because apparently, based on what the ending defenders have been saying, these things are more closely intertwined than I first thought. I already discussed Eren's character assassination at length in the previous video, so I'll just try to run through it quickly. Before the ending, I thought that when Eren touched Historia's hand, he saw his future memories, including a glimpse of the rumbling. He was horrified and spent years with his friends trying to find another way. But as his future memories kept coming to pass, and as the situation with the outside world looked more and more hopeless, he eventually accepted that, terrible as it was, he had no choice but to make the future he had seen a reality. Ymir had developed a slave mentality during her life, which is why she remained subservient to the Eldian king even in death. And this slave mentality, coupled with her one-sided love for the king, and presumably her love for her children, was what kept her trapped in the paths for 2,000 years. Now, when Eren made contact with Ymir, it's implied that he saw her memories, which is why he was able to understand her. And while it's not confirmed, it's plausible that Ymir could also have seen Eren's memories, which would help explain why she was receptive to his words. So Eren and Ymir see each other's memories and understand each other fully, and now they want to help each other out. Now, I had assumed that the way in which they would help each other would be something that made sense. I thought that Eren intended to use the rumbling to destroy the world and guarantee the long-term survival of Paradis. And I thought that Ymir agreed to help him out of gratitude for him freeing her, with the understanding that once the rumbling was over, there would be no more need for the Titans and she could leave the paths forever. With this in mind, I had assumed that neither Eren nor Ymir knew how things would end, and the alliance forming was a genuine surprise to both of them. I thought Eren wanted to give them the freedom to fight, both out of respect for their autonomy, but also because he felt guilty about the global genocide he was committing, and wanted to leave open the possibility of him being stopped. I'd thought that Ymir went along with this because she respects Eren, and because she doesn't really care how it all ends as long as it does end one way or another. I thought that was at least part of the reason why Eren told the Alliance that if they wanted to stop him, they had to kill him. His death would destroy the Founding Titan, and thus the Coordinate, so Ymir could finally be free even if Eren couldn't finish his plan. But apparently, all of my educated guesses were completely wrong, because according to the ending, the Founding Titan's power transcends the past, present, and future, implying that Eren and Ymir knew everything in advance. And apparently, Eren's actual goal was to force Mikasa to kill him, so that way Ymir could let go of her love for King Fritz, because Mikasa was able to kill the man she loved in a way that Ymir couldn't. Really, Isayama? Fucking really? This is what you were going for? How the fuck do you think this is even remotely acceptable? Why the fuck is Mikasa killing Eren the only way that Ymir could be freed from her love for King Fritz? How the fuck does that make any goddamn sense? It genuinely boggles my mind how some of the ending defenders are acting like Mikasa killing Eren to free Ymir was somehow a necessary thing just because that's what happened. You do realize that works of fiction don't have to be a certain way, right? Alien 3 didn't have to kill off all but one of the survivors from Aliens in the opening. That was a bad decision that deserved to be criticized. The Hobbit did not have to be split into a trilogy. That was a bad decision that deserved to be criticized. Terminator Genesis and Dark Fate did not have to exist. That was a bad decision that deserved to be criticized. And Mikasa did not have to kill Eren to set Ymir free. That was a bad decision that deserves to be criticized. I mean, come on. Are you seriously expecting me to believe that Mikasa killing Eren was the only way that Ymir could learn to let go of her love for King Fritz? For fuck's sake. Her love for King Fritz was what kept her in the paths and continuing to obey members of the royal family. So the fact that she ignored Zeke, a descendant of the royal family, and sided with Eren instead, means that she did let go of her love for the king. She had clearly let go of her need to follow his orders and the orders of his descendants, and instead chose a new path. So the idea that she needed Mikasa to kill Eren in order to be free is utter nonsense. And even if Ymir somehow got it in her head that the only way she could let go of her love for Fritz was to force Mikasa to kill Eren, why the fuck would Eren just go along with it? Based on what was established, Eren very much wants to complete the rumbling, and he very much does not want to have to fight his friends and kill or be killed by them. So if he knew that was coming, why wouldn't he try to avoid it? Why wouldn't he try to help Ymir get over her misguided love some other way? One that wouldn't force Mikasa to kill him and cause his plan to fail. Especially since they literally have all the time in the world in the paths. In well-written stories, characters who foresee a bad future don't just meekly accept their fate. They try to change it. And even if they ultimately fail, the story will provide logical explanations for why the future can't be changed. But that wasn't done here. The Eren we thought we knew would not have foreseen Mikasa killing him and then just gone, well, guess there's nothing I can do. That's just the way things are. And yet, inexplicably, that's exactly what he did. Like I said, the ending changes Eren's entire character from a darkly tragic but understandable figure to a passive doormat with no agency. On top of that, the idea that the Founding Titan transcends time has some pretty fucked up implications for Ymir. That means that, at least potentially, Ymir knew everything in advance from the moment she gains the power of the Titans, which means that right from the beginning she already knew that her love for King Fritz was unhealthy, and that the way she would learn this was by seeing Mikasa kill Eren. This changes her character from being a tragic, sympathetic figure to, at best, being a passive doormat like Eren, and at worst, into a next-level villain. A character who knew all of the death and destruction that the Titans would cause, and who had the power and knowledge to stop it before it happened, but chose not to, because she wanted to eventually watch Mikasa make out with Eren's disembodied head. I know that's not the only way to interpret it, but the fact that it's a valid interpretation is both extremely fucked up and incredibly stupid. Eren's behavior made perfect sense in light of his future memories and his circumstances, and Ymir's behavior made perfect sense in light of her slave mentality and her circumstances. But giving them both omniscience and future knowledge of how the story would end just renders their actions and motivations utterly nonsensical. Sure, you can come up with all kinds of rationalizations and justifications for what was done to Eren and Ymir, but all of the ones I've heard so far have been complete bullshit, and are clearly the desperate grasping at straws of people who want to believe that the ending is actually good somehow, rather than just accepting the harsher but simpler explanation that Isayama fucked up. Before the ending, Eren and Ymir were incredibly compelling characters, and Eren was by far one of the most well-written characters I had ever seen. But this ending strips all of the nuance and depth away from them and replaces it with gibbering nonsense. It's absolutely disgraceful, and they both deserved better. Problem 8. No Alliance casualties during the final battle. This is essentially just a continuation of Problem 1, but it's still worth noting. The ridiculously huge Titan army was problematic to begin with, but the fact that nobody in the Alliance died makes it even worse. In every battle during the series, people died. Sometimes the people who died would be side characters, sometimes they would be main characters, but there was always a cost. The Alliance had already lost Magath and Hanji before reaching Eren, and yet after fighting the Founding Titan and an army of former Titan shifters, not one member of the Alliance died. It's ridiculous. In particular, Reiner and Levi both had character arcs that would have been satisfactorily concluded with them dying. If Levi dies, he gets to reunite with his fallen comrades, while if he lives, he gets to spend the rest of his life a shadow of his former self, which doesn't sound so great. And of course, Reiner really wanted to die because of the guilt he felt over his many sins. So I genuinely don't understand why, at the very least, the story didn't let these two go out in a blaze of glory. It would have meant that, despite its faults, the final battle did have real stakes and real consequences. But instead, the final battle ended up just being empty spectacle, with cool-looking but utterly toothless threats. Problem 9. Mikasa's character assassination. Now, Mikasa wasn't exactly the most fleshed out character. She was fine, she was a badass, and she did have some depth, but for most of the series her focus was just on Eren. However, during Season 4, she was beginning to learn to not be so dependent on Eren, to stand on her own, and in the end even opposes him. And in Chapter 138, Eren tells her to forget about him and move on. Obviously she couldn't forget about him, but she could move on and be free. However, it's then revealed that while she had a family and lived to a ripe old age, she was buried with that damn scarf. This might seem like a minor thing, but the implications of this are downright insulting. Her being buried with the scarf indicates that all of the character growth she'd undergone in Season 4 was completely undone. She never got over Eren and spent the rest of her life hung up about him. Not only is this a massive fuck you to Mikasa's character, but it's also a massive fuck you to whoever her husband ended up being. Her visiting Eren's grave every once in a while I could forgive, but this is just infuriating. Her character assassination isn't as bad as Eren's, but Mikasa still deserved better. Problem 10. The fuck you that was the extra pages. Those of you who read the ending when it first came out will probably know what I'm referring to, but if you read the ending later, or if you're an anime only, allow me to explain. The original version of the ending had several pages missing, and it ended with the moment when Mikasa was under the tree visiting Eren by herself. All of the pages and panels after that moment were not included in the initial release. What this means is that the first version of the ending had quite a different tone and implication than the finished version. In the first version, it depicts the outside world struggling in the aftermath of the rumbling, and Paradis preparing itself for an eventual clash with the world. However, it also depicts the survivors of the Alliance going to Paradis acting as ambassadors on behalf of the world in an effort to try to come to some sort of peaceful solution. They don't know if it will work, but they want to at least try. This version of the ending concludes on a deliberately ambiguous note. There is still tension and hatred, and the very real possibility of future conflicts and wars. At the same time, though, the characters are doing their best to try to avert this, and maybe, just maybe, they will succeed. This ending was open to interpretation, but still had an unmistakable air of hope about it while still acknowledging the grim realities of the post-rumbling world. It reminds me of the ending in Terminator 2, where it was left ambiguous whether or not the characters had succeeded in changing the future and averting the dark fate they knew was coming. The film seems to lean towards yes, but it doesn't confirm it one way or another, and it's left open for the audience to interpret. While nowhere near as clever as Terminator 2, the ending to Attack on Titan seemed to be doing something similar. And while it could have been executed better, it was an open-ended conclusion to the story that I could almost respect. But then a few weeks later, the extra pages were released, and the ending went psych. You know the ambiguous and possibly hopeful implications of the ending? Yeah, we threw that all out. Peace didn't work out, and Paradis is destroyed. Humans suck, conflict is inevitable and unresolvable, and even the Titans might come back someday, which effectively renders this entire story pointless and meaningless. Even a lot of the people who originally liked the final chapter were pissed off by these extra pages, and for good reason. These panels completely changed the tone and message of the ending. If this was what you were going for, then why the fuck weren't these pages included in the original version of the ending? What was the point of including the more optimistic scenes if you were just going to rip it all away in the final pages? As terrible as the ending was originally, I could almost see what Isayama was going for, but the way he released those extra pages made it seem like he was deliberately trying to piss people off. I really don't see any other way to interpret the situation. And really, if the whole message of the story was supposed to be that life is pointless and meaningless, and that humans will always fight no matter what, then it should have gone for the ending where Eren killed the Alliance and completed the rumbling. Then the ending could have been like the ending to The Godfather Part 2, where the protagonist technically won, but in the process killed or alienated everyone he ever cared about, leaving him in the end to wonder if it was really worth it. And to really drive the point home, maybe Paradis could have been torn apart by strife or civil war afterwards, just to really underscore how the rumbling didn't actually solve all conflict, and once again leaving Eren to wonder if it was worth it, and if Paradis was actually worth saving. That would have been a dark but compelling ending that successfully conveyed the message about life being pointless and meaningless and all that depressing shit. Instead, he went for the ending where the Alliance won. But not only was it badly written and just riddled with plot holes, it couldn't even stick to the hopeful message that it was going for, and instead ended on a really dark note anyway. And in the end, we're left wondering what the hell the message of the story was supposed to be, or even if there was a message at all. Some people might say I shouldn't have included this problem, since unlike all of the other problems on this list, it only showed up in the manga, not the anime. But I think it's worth talking about because it highlights the key problem with the ending. It not only contradicts what had been previously established in the story, but it kept contradicting itself, indicating that the writer didn't really know what they were going for or what they were trying to say. And similar issues crop up all over the ending. Mikasa is learning to move past her love for Eren and be her own person. Oh wait, never mind, she obsesses over him for the rest of her life and is buried with that fucking scarf. All the Eldians were turned into Titans. Oh no, are they all going to die? Oh wait, never mind, they'll go back to human, so it's fine. Eren and Ymir have really compelling motivations for their actions. Oh wait, never mind, their motivations for their actions are actually something completely different that we didn't tell you about until the last minute. Oh my, it looks like Levi is going to have to give up his goal of revenge for the greater good. Oh wait, never mind, he gets to kill Zeke after all. Oh no, the Titans are incredibly dangerous, and even the normal ones are a major threat. Oh wait, never mind, they're such a small threat that a dozen people can fight hundreds of them without immediately being slaughtered. Oh no, despite their plot armor, the Alliance is going to lose. Oh wait, never mind, Ymir decided to change sides and is now going to let them win. Eren cares about the long-term survival of Paradis. Oh wait, never mind, he only cares about his friends, despite getting many of them killed, and doesn't actually give a shit about the consequences of his actions. And I could keep going. I'm only half joking when I say that Isayama must have had a stroke while writing the final volume, because how else does someone become such a terrible writer seemingly overnight? I just don't understand, and I probably never will. So those were 10 problems with the ending. They aren't the only ones, but they were the biggest ones and the ones that I found most personally offensive. Still, to be completely fair, I did write an article where I went over the things about the ending that I thought were actually good. If you're interested in hearing the handful of positive thoughts I have about the ending, then check out the link in the description. For those of you who, like me, hated the canon ending, I'll leave a link in the description to my version of the ending. I can't guarantee that you'll like it, but hopefully it will give at least a few people the closure they weren't able to get from the canon ending. And if you actually liked the canon ending, hopefully this video will have helped you to understand where those of us who didn't like the ending are coming from, at least a little bit.